to the Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting for Tuesday, October 30. Thought we might start the meeting with a brief moment of silence in honor of the victims in the terrible shooting in Pittsburgh. Thank you for taking this time. We have a agenda for us that our agenda teams put together, and I appreciate all that. I know Commissioner Farr will move to adjustments to agenda and has an adjustment he'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask for an adjustment to the agenda, moving item 6, County Council, to it's a new place after Commissioner's Business A and B. So it would be conducted before review assignments,
Okay.
in between what is now items 8 and 9.
Okay. Good. Are we having an executive session today?
Negative.
No. Okay. Okay. So any other adjustments to the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to our public comment. You know, David Piccioni is here. And Mr. Piccioni, if you could just restate your name, and what I'll do is I'll start my timer here and give you 3 minutes for public comment. Welcome.
Yeah, I know you would take that much. Yeah, my name is David Ivan Piccioni. I live on Van Buren between 6th and 7th. And this is a comment on behalf of my mom. She came from New Jersey last year in April, and she brought with her her dog, a beagle, and her cat. The cat's fine, but the beagle is what I want to talk about. There's a park on Jefferson called Jefferson Park, I think, where Jefferson and 15th meet. You guys aware of that? And it's kind of like an experimental project where they have 3 sides, but they haven't completed the 4th side. And the problem with beagles is that if you let them off the leash, they'll just follow their nose and take off. And it already happened once in New Jersey when my dad was still alive, and they found the dog 2 days later tied up with his leash under some bushes and stuff. So if that could be addressed, if that last piece of the park could be enclosed so animals can be left off their leash, and you don't have to worry about whether they're going to take off or, you know, because they're going to be enclosed, kind of like the park on Amazon Park. There's one for smaller dogs and one for bigger dogs, but they're both enclosed. So it's just, I heard that was an experimental project, and I would like to see it completed. Okay?
Okay. Well, thank you.
I don't know if this is a county thing or a city thing, so
Okay.
thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
meeting.
Thank you. And is there any other public comment? I don't see any others, so we'll now move to Commissioner's response to public comments and other issues and remonstrance. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, on that public testimony, my son has a beagle, so I certainly understand how they do follow their nose and don't pay attention to anything else. I'm not sure, maybe some clarification. Does Lane County actually have a dog park, or the city of Eugene? We do have a dog park.
At Armitage Park.
Okay, great. Yeah, I know dog parks are a very valuable asset. We created one in Cottage Grove, and it's worked out very well. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Any other Commissioner remonstrance?
Just briefly to that, I was a city councilor for 10 years. That is a Eugene City Council or city item. We do prescribe specific dog parks. I know this because in between Wards 6 and 8, when Nancy Nathanson was Ward 8 Commissioner, we had a park exchange between her ward and my ward, and a part of it was adding 2 dog parks in Ward 6. So dog parks are fenced, they are designated, and they are designated as dog parks. So.
Nice.
Then the other thing, just under items, is that we had some pretty interesting events over the weekend. I'm thinking, expecting, and hoping that Mr. Mocker High School will talk about what has happened with the movement of tent campers. A pretty significant string of events that happened over the weekend, and I'm not going to say anything about it right now, other than people who are in the downtown area will notice that there's a significant difference in camping on the Butterfly lot today than there was on Friday. We have Mr. Mocker High School, I'm expecting we'll say more about this, but we've designated county land in Bethel off of Highway 99 for a temporary tent camp, sanctioned, secure, monitored tent camp. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I was gonna devote a few comments to this tent camp on Highway 99. And we had, by some reports, hundreds of people. Certainly I drove by on Friday and saw dozens of people out on Oak Street and across the street from the Lane County Courthouse. All kinds of commotion and mess. And I think the downtown businesses were upset about this, and among the people they went to was Mr. Mokrajski, who I think we can fair to say jumped into action and worked with various people to get this temporary tent camp set up. I went out there on Sunday to take a look at it myself, and I think it has the, fenced off and pretty isolated from any residences, and pretty close to the kinds of services that homeless people need. So I know we're going to hear more about it, and I appreciate the work that went into it. Any other remonstrance? Okay. All right. Any emergency business?
No.
None? Thank you. While we're on emergency business, I just want to thank the agenda team and the county administrator for their role in setting up this meeting. A lot of times the public may not know that there's a huge amount of effort that goes into putting one of these agendas together, and we are mostly here to scrutinize the process and make sure things go right, but a huge amount of work has already gone into this. I know we have a time certain too. What time is that? 9:30. Okay, so we're on track for that. So I think we'll just take up the consent calendar, item 5. These are routine items, and if a commissioner wants to take something off the consent calendar, they can, and we can separately discuss it and vote on it. I know a huge amount of work went into this by staff, and I'm especially glad to see that we're submitting a grant application for the county to get a driving under the influence of intoxicants investigator, and the DA's office will be working with the state to get that grant. I hope we get it. We're also extending the travel Lane County contract through June 30, 2021. So that's going to be ongoing. Again, they might be considered routine, but they're major. So with that, I'll take a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Mr. Chair, I move
Commissioner
approval.
Farr, go ahead.
Thank you. I move the approval of the Tuesday, October 30th consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. And the motion does carry 3-0. I forgot to mention the obvious thing, and that is that 2 of our commissioners are not here.
Wait, what?
Yeah, shockingly enough. So maybe Mr. Mokrais could comment on that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we have Commissioner Bozovic and Commissioner Lyken are out of the area on personal business and not able to be here for the board meeting today. And they notified us well in advance of that. And so we've coordinated this meeting today. It's a rather light agenda, somewhat intentionally since we only have 3 commissioners. You're probably the most, other than the legislative update, most substantive item is an update on the courthouse. And both of those commissioners, I believe, have been updated. At least the chair has been updated on most of the issues related to the courthouse. So we wanted to bring that forward for the 3 of you so that you are in the loop on the work that's happened there. But other than that, we've tried to keep this relatively light.
Okay, and next up is item 7, and we have 3 items there, 9:30 time certain. I'm sure our architects will be here pretty soon, and Mr. Rickhoff. So do you want Mr. Mokreisky to take the announcements now, or do we want to get started on the legislative and then interrupt the legislative?
Let's do the latter. Let's have Mr. Kyler, if that's okay with you. He has another engagement, and so if we can have him do the legislative update, and then we'll see if time allows for announcements before or after the courthouse update.
Okay, go ahead. And our next item is item 7C, which is order 18-10-30-07. It's a report back on updating the priorities and principles for the Oregon legislature. And with us to discuss this is Alex Kyler, the Intergovernmental Relations Manager. I met with Mr. Kyler ahead of our meeting, and he gave me an overview and pointed out that most of this is fairly old, but we are updating it with a few items. Welcome.
Thank you. So, Commissioners, you should have a packet in front of you, and this is a report back from the Legislative Committee, which did meet on September 27th. There are 2 items that the committee took up. One was to continue to evolve the principles and priorities document, and that is in front of you. It's got a variety of track changes, so until you approve, it will remain like this, but when you approve, we'll go ahead and incorporate those changes. The other item in front of you is a letter to the governor. As you know, particular, Mr. Chair, the governor receives her agency request budgets from agencies, and she has until December 1st to then put forward her governor's recommended budget. And so the committee discussed a number of items that staff and others had noted in the agency request budgets, and so we've got a letter to her. So I'll start with the principles and priorities document. This one, we made a number of minor changes to. In the beginning of it, there was a little item that we needed to take care of with respect to how we might utilize the board chair's signature when it goes on to correspondence, that we took care of. We added, and you can see specifically what we added on page 2 of your memo. We added several priorities, one about Medicaid reform for people who are incarcerated in jail, one about diversity and access to services by non-English language speakers. We wanted to continue to address harmful algal bloom outbreaks. It's an issue that is becoming more and more common in Lane County. We formalized efforts to mitigate wildfire smoke. We are addressing Lane County's high rate of roadway fatalities, and then we had a little issue about fiber networks and who owns them. We additionally discussed adding one actual legislative priority, and that came about due to legislative days in September, where we had a presentation in Salem about the Housing First project. And there's a little piece of statute that we think needs to be amended such that it removes a policy where the state agency, the Oregon Housing Authority in particular, was directed to use certain funds only for clean and sober housing. And so we think that it would be well to do away with that language, to recognize that In fact, Housing First is an evidence-based model, and whereby you provide housing to people who may still have a current substance use disorder. So that's really the extent of the changes to the priorities and principles document, and your order is what addresses that.
Okay,
Okay?
Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. And, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'll talk a little bit about the latter item that you were speaking about regarding the use of state housing funds for supportive housing. We'll call it supportive housing. Some people have called it wet bed housing. There are other names, but I choose to not use that one. Supportive housing is evidence-based, as you mentioned, and we're demonstrating over and over again that by allowing people to have safe, secure, stable residence with wraparound services, it enhances their chances and their possibility of their receiving the treatment or continuing existing treatment at a far higher rate than if they were not in safe and secure housing. So this is a reasonable request, and it's one that really has the greatest return on the investment for any dollar spent on housing, is money spent on what we call supportive housing. And the Poverty and Homelessness Board has a goal. One of its higher goals is to provide up to 600 beds of supportive housing between now and 2021. This goes right along with that goal, and the Board of County Commissioners has approved this a similar goal. In fact, our strategic priorities include addressing housing needs, including supportive housing. So, Mr. Chair, this is a very worthwhile set of priority adjustments. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions from commissioners? I'll just say, first of all, I'm in favor of this and appreciate the work that went into it. The other thing I'll mention is that housing will be, I'm sure, a major issue in the 2019 Oregon legislature, and we will be a big part of that in our role with our intergovernmental relations program, as well as the work of the individual commissioners. And specifically on housing, we know that there's a ballot measure that'll be voted on 1 week from today. The conclusion of the voting, I guess, I've already voted. But the voters will decide whether or not there's going to be a constitutional amendment to allow local governments, cities and counties, and maybe other local governments like Metro and Portland, I don't know, but basically looking at it through a Lane County lens, the city of Eugene, the city of Springfield, the city of Cottage Grove, the Lane County government, and maybe even the Homes for Good. I don't know the extent of what agencies would be allowed, but assuming that is approved, and it has pretty widespread support, assuming that is approved, we need to jump into, in my view, we need to really jump into it and find out what our rights and responsibilities are. My understanding is that if we put out a bond for this, that it will require voter approval. So we have to think carefully about how we're going to put that out, if we do, and what agencies of Lane County government should be involved in putting together a proposal. Okay, anything further from staff, from commissioners?
Well, if you, Mr. Chair, if you'd go ahead and do the board order, and then I'll just touch on the letter.
Okay, very good. So we have a motion to approve, is that right, Mr. Farr?
I've not made the motion yet.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I move to adopt Board Order 1810-3007 outlining changes to the Lane County Legislative Principles and Priorities document as outlined in Attachment A, which can be viewed online.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the report back and the order as presented and in our agenda. And anything further on the motion? Yes, sir.
Just while I have the opportunity to talk about housing, I keep this article with me at all times. Oregon's housing crisis, the lack of affordable housing at all levels, is a crisis in Oregon. And it's not just in Eugene and Lane County and Springfield and our rural communities. It's all over Oregon, which exacerbates the issue in our metropolitan areas. So focus on housing, Alex, in the upcoming legislative session is one that we've talked about extensively. In fact, if I'm looking at our strategic plan right now, strategic priority 1, initiative 1, so this is item 1.1 on our strategic plan, is affordable housing and homelessness. So this fits the priorities of discussing at the upcoming legislative session, which is going to have a key focus on housing in a number of different levels, including supportive housing. So I'm, of course, in favor of this agenda. Thank you.
Okay, so, hearing no further requests to speak, let's have a vote on Order 18-10-30-07. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, please say no. The motion carries 3-2 with Commissioners Bozovich and Lycan excused. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And part of this item C was the letter to the governor, and I'll have Alex Kyler discuss that.
Thank you. So again, Chair Sorenson and members, this is a letter to the governor. She is in the process of putting together her governor's recommended budget to the legislature. It's due December 1st, so getting a letter up now is fairly timely in her process. What we've done here is outline a couple of different policy option packages from a variety of agencies, and you will mostly see, I think, a reflection of the priorities and items that have come before the board previously. So public health modernization, for example, is a well-known issue. I think you've been briefed on it a couple of times. Very good policy that was passed 2 sessions ago, never really adequately funded. The Oregon Health Authority has put forward a request for almost $50 million for public health modernization, so we're seeking support of that. There are some additional dollars for aid and assist services up at the Oregon State Hospital. This is something that's exceedingly important for this area, as we tend to be one of what's called a high sending county to folks up to the Oregon State Hospital for assistance with their participating in their own defense. We've also, under the Oregon Health Authority, are mentioning a policy option package for suicide prevention. Again, that's been a priority of the board and been presented to the board before. DEQ's got a wood smoke policy option package that continues with an effort that we began last session with some seed money that is helping specific cities and regions around the state that have wood smoke issues. DHS has got a 100% workload model for individuals with developmental disabilities. This is an incredibly important POP for folks here who it would really help us attract staff and continue to employ them. We've got a couple of different housing items that we are highlighting. Housing and Community Services has some dollars for homelessness reduction that are really robust in the agency request budget. And then finally, 2 related to public safety, one through the the Criminal Justice Commission, which is actually names Lane County in the POP for $3 million in a project that's Homes for Good, sponsors, and Lane County Parole and Probation. So we've obviously mentioned that one. And then finally, the Community Corrections Act funding. There was a recent time study done that sort of adjusts the rate at which the state is to pay for the cost of supervision. And this would result in about $50 million additional Community Corrections Act dollars. We typically see about 10% of those dollars, so that would be a very nice boost for Lane County Public Safety. And then finally, we add a little blurb at the tail end of the letter to talk about marijuana revenue. Under Measure 91, there was a promise that those dollars would not supplant general fund. The legislature quickly did away with that language, and the governor and the legislature did quite a bit of supplanting of those dollars last budget cycle, and so we're just making a point to ask that not continue. I don't know that this will carry much weight, but there is sort of a coordinated attempt to send this message from counties to the governor's office. So with that, staff recommends you move approval of this letter.
Okay, so could I first entertain a motion to approve the letter?
Mr. Chair, I move to finalize and send correspondence attachment B, which is available online to view, to Oregon Governor Kate Brown regarding Lane County's recommendation on her 2019-21 recommended budget, and speak to the motion if I receive a second.
Second.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just real quickly, we have a good history of Governor Brown listening to our requests and letters. The last time when I was chair, I co-signed a letter with Mayor Vinnis asking for $295,000, which we, outside of the regular budget process, we received in very short order. And that wound up being in no small part the St. Vincent de Paul's family shelter, which just opened at 40th and West Amazon. So we do have a good history of Governor Brown and other governors paying attention to what we ask for. And the second thing, very quickly, tonight, we're regarding suicide prevention, which is a part of our request in the letter. We do have a suicide prevention in Lane County Community Forum tonight. It's headed by, it's facilitated by Roger Brubaker from Lane County Health and Human Services. And it's out at Lane Community College from 5:30 to 7:30 tonight.
Anything further from commissioners, staff on this motion? Okay. I'll just say, I think that we've had a pretty good relationship with the governor's staff in terms of writing letters and not having them just round filed when they arrive. And periodically the governor will mention when she's in Eugene, at least to me, oh, I just got a letter from Lane County, and so we know that they are being received up there. One thing that I would like to do, and maybe this is more of a next year thing, but give some thought to, is in the deep past, we did invite the Congressman DeFazio and Senators Merkley and before him Senator Smith and Senator Wyden, the governor and other people to come to our meetings, and they actually came, and it was more personal, and we could then just hand them a copy of our more recent letter and make sure that they got it. So just an idea down the road if the board wants to move in that direction. So anything further on the motion to send the letter? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Commissioners Bozovich and Lyken are excused. The motion carries 3-0. And we'll get that signed either by me or Commissioner Bozovich. Okay?
Yep.
All right, now with 2 minutes and 24 seconds to spare, do you guys need time to set up the room for the presentation, or is this going to be like old school architecture with actual drawings?
Chair Sorenson, I think we need about 2 minutes and
Okay.
20 seconds. to
Okay,
set up
well,
the
why
room.
don't we just take a break then for,
Mr. Chair.
do you think?
I'm happy to do an elections update. That will take about
Well,
2
we
minutes.
don't need to take a
How about
break
if we do
because
that?
simultaneously with the
We'll multitask.
The technical change will be a report back from Mr. Motorheisky, item 7A, part of his announcements. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, quick update on the November 6th general election. Voter registration is 260,950 registered voters in Lane County. Through yesterday, Monday, October 29th, we had 54,009 ballots returned. That's a 20.73% return rate of registered voters. We update the voter turnout at least every other day and post that on our website, which you can find at lanecounty.org/elections under the November 6th general election tab. In 2008, this year, the returns, and I have stickers here. Let's pass around the stickers. We have an I voted or an I voted early sticker. You can take one or one of each.
Oh, you guys didn't get that.
So the returns are up nearly, you may have seen this reported in the paper today. The returns this general election are up nearly 14,000 ballots when you compare them to the same time in the last general election, 2014. So the ballots received in 2014 were 40,082, or 19.26% at that time. So we're up 14,000 ballots same time 4 years ago. 33,352, or 63% of the returned ballots have been left at one of our 20 drop sites. So 63% of the ballots returned were left at the drop sites. Tomorrow is the last day for postal service, so if you're mailing it and you want to ensure delivery no later than Election Day next Tuesday, you want to get it in the mail by tomorrow, Wednesday, October 31st. Ballots must be received at any official drop site location no later than 8 p.m. on Election Day. And that is that. I have one update on the Egan Warming Center, but I think I'll hold that for... So can I reserve the balance of my time for after the courthouse presentation?
Seems like the new leadership is allowing that kind of flexibility. Okay, so,
So if you don't want me to call you tomorrow, vote today.
Yes.
so, it's now my distinct privilege to, move to item, 7B, and this is an update on the Lane County, courthouse project update. And I know we have lots of important people around the room, so I think I'll start with the outer circle moving in this direction, and then I'll start with the inner circle, and everybody could introduce themselves.
We have an active Lane County Public Information Officer.
Jeff Kincaid, Management Analyst.
You just we want you to introduce yourself briefly. Yep,
I'm Bill Sider.
very good.
I'm Jim Smith with Smith, Dawson, and Andrews, the county's government affairs firm from Washington, D.C.
Brett Garson, also with Smith, Dawson, and Andrews.
Mary Cronin, also with Smith, Dawson, and Andrews.
I'm Alex Kyler, I'm Lane County's Intergovernmental Relations Manager.
Gary Williams, County Commissioner.
Steve Mokrahysky, County Administrator.
Liz Rambo, Circuit Court.
Todd Orr, Architect, DLR Group.
Randy Nishimura, Architect with Robertson Sherwood Architects.
Carla Weinheimer, Architect, DLR Group.
Jim Robertson, Architect with Robertson Sherwood Architects.
Greg Rickoff, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Lane County.
Jim Cheney, I'm an Assistant County Counsel and the Interim Project Manager for the courthouse.
Pat Farr, Board of County Commissioners, Murphy Jean.
Pete Sorenson, not Chair of the Lane County Board of Commissioners, Lane County Commissioner for the South Eugene District. And I know that our other two commissioners have been heavily involved in getting this update. So we decided to move ahead because among other people would be Mr. Smith and his colleagues to get this from the horse's mouth as to what the direction we're moving in. I'd like to call on Mr. Rickoff, our Director of Operations, to kind of give an overview of what this presentation is set up for. It's set up for about an hour.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen, and I am going to very quickly pass it over to our Interim Project Manager, Jim Cheney.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner, Chair Sorensen, Commissioners. So we're here to talk about the need for a new Lane County courthouse. The first building that Lane County owned was a courthouse built in 1855. And since 1855, about every 50 or 60 years, as the old buildings wore out, became unsafe, impractical to operate, and hard to maintain, each the courthouses has been replaced. When it's been replaced, each of the courthouses has been several times larger than the last one. At this point, it's been over 60 years since we started planning for the last courthouse that was completed in 1959. That building is 160 feet square. It's about 110,000 square feet in area. As you know, all the regular offices of the county were moved out in the 1970s when the public service building here was built, and to make room for more courtrooms. So that building now contains the courts, the district attorney's office, the sheriff's office, and court-related services exclusively. The courts occupy most of that space, and they outgrew their space there a long time ago. That's not an uncommon problem in Oregon as a continually growing state, but it's one that's particularly acute here in Lane County. 10 years ago, the state of Oregon did an assessment of the building and concluded it was seriously deficient, not just in terms of operational performance and economy, but in terms of basic safety and security. That study, when presented to the commissioners, prompted the county to order a study by the National Center for State Courts, the NCSC. The NCSC study showed that it's impossible to accommodate just even the present needs of the courts within that 160 by 160 square foot building. Even if the building could be remodeled without disrupting the court of the sheriff's operations, there's no amount of remodeling that can make the building more than twice as big, or strong enough, or safe enough, or secure enough. And that means, as in the case, a new courthouse is going to have to be much bigger than the existing courthouse. And that means we had to find a place where we could put a new courthouse building that was much larger than the existing.
Thank you. So efforts aimed at siting a new courthouse really started to take up speed in 2016. We engaged with the City of Eugene in a partnership. We brought along Cameron McCarthy and the Lane County Circuit Court, of course, and actually Robertson Sherwood was part of that effort as well as the farmers market and Saturday market to really look at a siting study. The culmination of those efforts was a signing of a purchase and sale agreement where the county agreed to purchase the former City Hall lot and the city agreed to purchase the Butterfly lot. As part of the purchase and sale agreement, the city requested that the county seek clarity on the legal use of the Butterfly lot. To that end, the county began the quiet title process in March of 2018. The judge agreed that there are no restrictions to the city's use of the Butterfly lot and signed a judgment to that effect last week. The county undertook concurrent efforts to select, retain, and begin work with an architect to conduct a scoping study. And what you will hear today is some background as well as some of the preliminary results of the scoping study for the creation of a new Lane County courthouse.
So this scoping study is the result of, acting as the project manager on an interim basis in order to evaluate the sites and how realistic it is to be able to accommodate a courthouse on any lot. We need to make, in order to do that, we needed some expert assistance. So we engaged the team of experts who are experts in design of public buildings, both locally and nationally, and courthouses. So what you're going to see today is the result of that scoping study for the courthouse project. This is not an architectural design. These aren't necessarily our architects for the courthouse. We engaged this team, which is Robertson Sherwood Architects of Eugene and the national firm DLR Group, coming out of their Portland office, to evaluate and provide recommendations that would validate how a new courthouse could be accommodated here downtown. And what they're going to do is present what could be done to create a functional, safe, and secure downtown justice center that includes the courts, the sheriff's office, the district attorney, and the court-related services. So with that, then, I think I'll turn the presentation over to our group of experts. Randy?
And before I call on those folks, what is the approximate length of this presentation? Because I already have requests for commissioners to ask questions. How much more uninterrupted time would you like?
I think we're probably 20 minutes or so.
20 minutes, and I don't know if you want to take questions as you go, or would you like them to?
Mine is procedural.
Okay, well, I'll take Commissioner Farr's question.
Typically when we're seeing a presentation, the public can also pull it up online. This is different. We're seeing this for the very first time, so the public, this will be the first time the public sees it, and they don't have a click here button on our agenda. At what point will this be made available to the public online?
We'll get that to Diana Jones this morning.
Perfect. That was the answer I expected. Thank you.
Okay, so, and I've got a lot of questions too, so I'm just trying to restrain myself from asking them. So I think it'd be best to just go ahead with the presentation,
all right,
and then we'll start giving you questions.
Okay, all those questions.
So I'll just again reiterate for what Jim Chaney said, which is that This is a team that was assembled to prepare a scoping study, not a design. And toward that end, our firm, Jim Robertson and my firm, Robertson Sherwood Architects, is a local firm that brings in a certain level of urban design and expertise and familiarity with downtown Eugene. We teamed with DLR Group, both from the Portland office and the Orlando office. And Todd Orr, sitting next to me here, is from the Orlando office, represents the highest level of courts expertise that DLR can present. We've been very pleased to work with them on this scoping study, and at this time, I think I'll just turn it over to Todd for the presentation.
Right. Thank you, Rennie, and thank you for your time, Commissioners. We have, as a team for this scoping study, there's sort of three major parts. One is to verify the program using the NCSC report that was initially produced back in 2016. The second part was actually to test fit an architectural concept, if you will, that was working with the site that we know that we have available to work with. The third piece is obviously developing a budget and some scoping documents that support that budget. For today's purposes, we're looking at those first two pieces, understanding the program, what is our space needs, what do we need going forward, and then how do we test that. Again, it's not a design. I think it'll seem very real. It's the nature of the technology we have available to us today. The hand sketches of the past are now can be done in the computer very quickly, so they'll feel very real. But again, it's just a concept and just to understand the parameters and how this potential program would work on your site. So here is a quick snapshot of the departments. Jim had already mentioned a few of these. A lot of these are in the facility today. The column on the right, which is noted as the 2016, those are the numbers, the bottom line number that was generated in the National Center for State Court study back in 2016. So for the last several weeks, we've been holding one-on-one workshops with key stakeholder groups that represent the departments that you see here. Understanding their operations, verifying numbers that were originally put together in 2016, knowing that we're now 2 years down the road, where have things already grown, where have things changed, and making sure we document that so that we are moving forward with a real number, one that's current and accurate based on what we're hearing today. And being able to walk in their shoes and understand their operations, tour the space, understanding the conditions in this building, and also understanding the best practices. How do we make sure that we're building a building, or planning for a building, I should say, that incorporates all the needs today, but also is looking to the future so that we're not hemmed in, as Jim said, we're looking at a building that's 60, 70, 80 years. We're going to make sure that this building is planned for that. So some of the things that come up as we look at the individual program pieces, one of the things that you'll see is that understanding how a courtroom works and understanding how do we provide a secure inmate delivery to a modern courthouse. Today, that is one of the major deficiencies that's in the facility today. So when we develop the program, we want to make sure that we have that built into the program and built into our planning standards. So what we did to make sure that we understand how that works, in some cases we can use the mathematics of a program to generate an area. But we like to, as architects, to test that in a real drawing. So know that when we put the numbers together, is it actually doing what we're saying it's going to do? Is it actually functioning the way we say it's going to function for the courts? So we develop space standards for some key areas, and that happens throughout all the departments, district attorney for the sheriff, where we know we want to make sure that we have the right kit of parts that support the operational model and are providing a level of service to the community and to the individuals that are using the courthouse facility. So the number that you see in the upper left-hand corner, that 1,750, that represents the floor area that's required to make this standard courtroom type, which is kind of our workhorse courtroom. And we're using that throughout all the courtroom types. That's one of the things that evolved from the 16 program to the 18 program to make sure they're hitting all the key area targets and making sure the building is a long-term flexible building. A building block for the courthouse of today is having a pair of courtrooms, which you see in this diagram, one on the left and one on the right. It's the same courtroom diagram that you saw on the previous slide, and having a holding core that is co-located on the court floor between those pairs of courtrooms. That allows for that secure inmate delivery to happen between those courtrooms. So this is a basic building block that we're carrying forward to help us understand not only how we provide a safe and secure courthouse facility of today, but also when we look at the site information and how this building deploys on the site as a potential solution. Knowing this planning module and knowing these dimensions are very critical when we look at how this building will operate on the fixed conditions of your existing site. So is it related to the site conversation? As we move from taking those numbers laying that out on the site, making sure we have organizational model, making sure that departments are located where they want to be in the building, located in a way that provide service to the clients, to the community. We looked at a few things that are very sort of high level, again, a high level overview of what that means to downtown and what that means to an operational court facility. From the site organization standpoint, we know that we need to have those separate points on the site for access, both for the public arriving to the site, for secure access to the site, and the staff access to the site. Not doing that in the vacuum, since we know the property that we have available to us, and understanding the traffic flows in and around that site was very important, so we're not designing in a vacuum or thinking about this building long-term in a vacuum. So as we set the foundation for future teams to look at this project, we know that we've done our due diligence and our homework to know that things that we're putting forward are workable and achievable. One of the key elements of this building that's inherited from the conditions you have today is the sort of interplay of the main court functions of the building and the sheriff's department. Right now, the building is stratified sort of vertically, where the sheriff is on the lower level and the court pieces and the support departments on the floors above. As we move that model, those same departments are still in our program today. As we move that model to the new site, how does that want to deploy? We want to make sure that we're keeping mindful of the height of the building, how that sits and integrates within downtown. We also want to make sure we understand the presence of the sheriff facility and the presence of the courthouse, because they're sort of two different functions that are sort of operating together in conjunction for efficiency and programming efficiency standpoints. But how you access the court from the citizen through security versus accessing the sheriff facility, not having to go through security, are sort of two different dynamics that are being brought together as we move this diagram or this concept to a new site. So understanding how the entries work together is one of the key things that we went through with the stakeholder groups in our series of meetings to understand how that wants to be carried forward. And again, as you can appreciate, there's a lot of high volume functions that are in the court facility and in the sheriff facility. So we want to make sure that when we stratify the building, they're providing access, easy access to those high volume access functions on the lower levels of the building, so we're not having to move a large population up into the facility. All things that are part of what we looked at in looking at the site. So just a quick snapshot, everyone's familiar. The project site is just to the east of us here today, bounded by the north on 7th Avenue, 8th on the south, and High on the east, and Pearl on the west. So some of the things that we did as part of our due diligence with Randy's team at Robertson Sherwood and our local partners in Cameron McCarthy is understanding current and future traffic flows, how property will be accessed. So that set up an idea about where the front door of the building wants to be, what are the prime access points on the site, obviously facing 8th Avenue to the south, and the corner of 8th and Pearl was important. We know obviously from the City of Eugene Great Streets program about how the building would want to present itself in the downtown. So those kind of overarching ideas are present in how we're looking at placing this building on the site and organizing how the site will ultimately work. The graphical diagram that you see here is a very simplified diagram, understanding that areas in blue represent the court's functions, the areas in red representing the sheriff functions. And we have detailed plans that kind of show this on a floor-by-floor basis to get a better understanding of what we're looking at. And then the yellow areas in the lower level are just highlighting where those kind of primary publicly accessed points are. Although they're in close proximity, the entrance to the courts facility and the entrance to the sheriff facility are kind of around the corner from one another, with the courts being more prominent on 8th and the sheriff piece being more prominent on Pearl. But they're in close proximity, kind of minimizing that sort of front door aspect of the project. So while that other diagram was looking at it kind of from an aerial perspective, kind of giving you an idea of the scale of the building, this is a two-dimensional site plan diagram of that same model that we just looked at. So you can see the yellow arrows are noting entry for sheriff along Pearl between the PSB building and the new site. And then at the corner of Pearl and 8th, the entrance to the court facility. All the footprint in blue represents the court facility, the footprint in red representing the footprint of the sheriff facility. All intertwined and interconnected from the interior standpoint, but having a distinct entry point and operational model on the site. The northeast corner is opportunities for parking, and that's one of the things we're continuing to work through with the stakeholder groups and understanding It's one of the things that we've talked about sort of ongoing is how we provide and maximize either opportunities for on-site parking today or the potential for the county to look at other development in that corner down the road. Kind of keeping that free, it was one of the kind of the goals that sort of came out in the conversations working with the various stakeholder groups. And the arrows around the site, which may be kind of hard to read in the gray, but those are all representing, you know, the change in the traffic flow that exists today and the traffic flow that will be present when the building is ultimately moving forward into the design and construction phases. And understanding how that traffic flow is going to work tells us something about access points on the site. We know that delivering inmates and in custodies from the jail, that's a certain traffic route. And where does that want to ultimately end up on the site? We thought through all that and worked very closely with the sheriff's group to understand the dynamics and how that works on a daily basis, something they'll have to work through. So quickly, we have a series of floor plan diagrams, and we felt like it's very important as sort of architects and sort of translating the numerical program into an actual plan layout to make sure that we're capturing the area that's needed and understanding how those pieces and parts ultimately go together. Looking forward to what may be future design idea. And again, these are just concepts. So in the lower level, largely for secure area, I don't want to get into too much detail there. The opportunities for parking, opportunities for inmate delivery at the lower level of the facility. Here we're seeing the main first floor of the building, and as an orientation to the top of the drawing is 7th Avenue, to the bottom of the diagram is 8th, Pearl to the left-hand side, and High Street to the right. So you can see the areas in yellow on the bottom would be the entry screening area for the court facility. Around the corner in the yellow block is the entry piece for the sheriff facility. So on the lower level, the two programs of the sheriff and the court facility are quite distinct, and the entrances are quite distinct. But with a small opportunity for some overlap for the staff from the sheriff's side and the staff on the court side to overlap, because we do know there's an interaction between those departments in a functioning courthouse. And the balance of the lower level in this diagram has court administration, public defense services, and probation and parole, with some building support functions, as you can appreciate, you know, service and delivery and maintenance of the facility. The second floor of the facility, as you see in this diagram, again, north is up, 7th Avenue to the top of the page, 8th Avenue to the bottom of the page, is a mix between the sheriff component and the district attorney. One of the things that we're trying to achieve in these diagrams, in this concept, was to provide enough contiguous floor area so that the larger departments, like the district attorney, like court administration, for as much as they possibly can, and the sheriff, have larger contiguous footprints so they're not splitting staff and having to define long-term how they're dividing their departments. This concept is trying to move forward and provide as much area together, co-located on the common floor, to provide operational efficiency and not redundant, making redundant functions or program elements within the building. As we move to the upper floors of the plan, this is largely the diagram kind of realized from those space standards that we were showing earlier for the para courtrooms and the holding area in between. So when you look at courthouse planning and design, there are sort of these modules of 2. So we can look at a 4 court per floor, a 6 court per floor, or 8 courts per floor. And with this group and the stakeholder committee, we developed options on the site of mixing and matching how many courts could we get on the floor. We ultimately, for this purposes, moving forward, we kind of arrived at a 4 court per floor option, which provided us some flexibility because there is some limitation in the overall dimensions of the site. If you imagine adding 2 more links in the chain, if you will, we're kind of really getting to the limits of the site and provide some level of buffer and some flexibility down the road. We felt like, at least for now, at this sort of high level scoping study, to kind of leave it at 4 courts per floor and just make the building stack vertically as opposed to making it longer and narrower. So a typical court floor, which you see here, would be levels 4 through 6, would be 4 courtrooms on the floor with the holding area between. And on the back or the north side of the plan would be all the support functions, the chambers and offices and things of that nature. On the upper floor of the building, we have the balance of the courtrooms. There'll be 2 on this floor, and there'll be some additional space on this floor. And for this particular concept, we're looking at the jury assembly space, and/or the balance of court administration, kind of the more executive level areas. When we look at an overall stacking and organizational diagram, this floor could either be the 7th floor or the 3rd floor. There's some flexibility built in about where we want that to reside in the overall stacking. There are opportunities either way, pros and cons either way. That's a decision that can be made down the road, but just to know that there is some built-in flexibility with this approach to the organization of the floor plan and of the overall building. We provide this plan here. This is a blow-up of a typical court floor plan, and one of the things that we talked a lot about in our stakeholder workshops is the notion of the public space, the area that's in yellow, about how that space becomes a very usable, functional workspace. It is not merely just merely a circulation spine to get from a courtroom to the elevators to move around on the floor. It is designed, programmed space where there's meeting space for attorneys and clients that may have, a quick conversation before they step into a court, the breakout areas for that to happen. Lining the corridor, as you can see in the noted in these conferencing spaces, that is a basic sort of planning module and a basic planning idea that's part of a modern courthouse. Provide those rooms where attorneys and their clients can step into, have a private conversation out of the main flow of the public circulation area, but also having these breakout spaces or alcoves along the area as well. Also providing a variety of seating arrangements, which are noted with the seating diagram here in this floor plan. The idea is that we're providing flexibility in the future, that it's not just a sort of a one-liner kind of a story. There's a variety of ways that this building is functioning, and to note that what is unique about a courthouse is that the circulation space is design space. It is program space. It is not merely just a corridor to get from A to B. A lot of the conversations we had with the attorney, the district attorney, and other attorneys that will be utilizing this building, very important concept, and just wanted to sort of highlight that level of detail that was in that thought that was put in by this group. Here's a quick building section which shows the vertical organization as we went through those floor plans and kind of what that means in a quick snapshot. So what this is doing is essentially taking that vertical stacking module and almost like taking an orange and cutting it in half, looking inside. So here you see the individual floors and the different program elements that are on each floor. So on the right-hand side, we have about a 7-story building with 1 level below grade. And again, that below grade space is for, it's kind of secure areas for future development. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there are sort of 3 parts to what the scoping study is going to entail. The first part obviously being the definition of the program and the space needs. The second part is understanding how this program deploys on the site and what opportunities there might be moving forward for a design team that would eventually take this project across the finish line. But the other part is to provide some level of guidance and due diligence in building a case for the numbers in the budget. So this is just one little piece as we start to move into that process, understanding where the dollars are and understanding how we build our budgets and making it more real and understanding it's not just sort of picking numbers out of the sky. So what we did is we looked at this overall building massing and provided some analysis for the cost estimating purposes about where windows are, where we see solar orientation impacting the building, and kind of went basically around the building and just did a sort of high level understanding of kind of where solid void, things of that nature are at, where materials would be applied, and providing that level of background to our estimator. So that kind of, in a nutshell, kind of documents kind of where we're at in the process moving forward. So if there's any other comments by the design team or
any other comments from you guys before we start asking you lots of questions?
Well, sorry, Greg. Ultimately, this will be captured in a report, everything that Todd just presented, as well as referencing the separate cost model. The numbers will be in the report, but the county retained J&B Consulting, John Bales, as the cost consultant to help us prepare the numbers based on this initial concept or study.
Todd referred to the universal courtroom, and I just wanted to expound on that for a moment, that the courtroom design was actually a decision by presiding judge vote confirmed by her 14 independently elected colleagues, that this universal design, what Todd referred to as a kind of a workhorse courtroom made for great functionality, the ability for equity across the board and for judges really to stay put, as you might be aware, as seniority changes within the courthouse and with different purposes and courtrooms being of varying sizes and consequently varying purposes, there's a fair amount of moving and shifting with this universal design. It really helps folks find a place, have that place, and understand, even for law enforcement, when they're in a courtroom, they know how that courtroom works. So we think there's great wisdom in that decision by the judges. And
Yes, and it also may help provide flexibility in the future about how we serve the public in the building and where certain court proceedings are located based on what the need is. Where when we change the sizes floor to floor, you're really limited to what proceedings you can offer where to the public. And something like this, universal design, will really help with that.
Okay, well,
Well,
Cheney
I'll
has the last
I'll
word.
add one thing to that, and then I want to talk for a moment about costs and about how this looks at that. The other thing is one of the things that drives size is also accessibility. One of the huge problems we have with the existing courthouse building is if there's anyone with a mobility disability, whether they're a juror, whether they're a witness, whether they're a plaintiff, whatever they are, extremely hard just to get people in and out of the building, much less accommodate them in jury boxes, witness stands, given the size of the courtrooms and the layout of the courtrooms we have. And so that's a significant change also related to the courtrooms. The other thing is, as Todd has said, and I said earlier, this isn't the design we have, but it's really important to get the right stack, to get the right set of Legos that you know you can build the building out of, because with that you can come up with quantities, and it's the quantities of windows, it's the quantities of walls that drive costs. And so we have to get to a certain level of design, even though we aren't there in terms of project planning, so that we can prepare a reasonable budget or a reasonable estimate of what the possible future costs would be. Otherwise, the only thing we can do is say, oh, they built one of these in Kansas City is twice this size, so ours will cost half as much money. And so in order to be a little more sophisticated than that, the next step that will go in here is to go through cost modeling so that we can get it, so that we can present and understand exactly what the entire costs would be related to building a replacement courthouse, and that'll be part of the final study too. We haven't gotten to that point yet. It'll be something we'll be working on the next few weeks.
Okay, well, I'll just start out by saying thank you so much for this presentation, and kind of procedurally, when will these report, you mentioned this will be turned into a report, when will this be turned into a report?
Great.
you will be receiving the final report and a conversation about where do we go from here on December 18th. So that's
Okay.
when it'll come back to.
So we're gonna talk
Board of
about the
County
report on
Commissioners.
December 18, and we're gonna get the report?
You'll get it in advance of that meeting.
Okay, all right. And I had a question at the start about this, and that is that when I was a lawyer in private practice in Eugene, there were lots and lots of trials. But the New York Times said, in 1997, now this is federal court data nationwide, 3,000 of the 63,000 federal inmates were convicted in jury trials, but in 2015, that was in 1997, but in 2015 there were only 1,650 jury convictions out of 81,000 defendants. So you're planning, as I see it, to have a jury box in every one of these courtrooms when you have a guilty plea rate of 81%. Now these are nation statistics, and they're federal, they're not Oregon, and they're not Lane County, I get that. But suffice to say that you're building a courthouse for a time in history when there were lots of trials, and now we have mediation and discussion and other ways of resolving disputes other than the time-honored jury system. Maybe you could address this as being the kind of national expert locally, currently here, that I don't see the kind of spaces allotted to mediation but I do see in every courtroom a 12 jury box that's empty 90% of the time. So could you give us your take on that?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, we didn't get into a level of detail on the mediation spaces, but there are, and within the program, there are mediation spaces on each floor for that exact flexibility that's built into the plan. So yes, we have accounted for that, and that's one of the things, actually, believe it or not, that was not in the original NCSC program. There was mention of that as a trend and as a way of resolving cases, but the actual area allocation and that being built into the program was not part of those numbers. So that's one of the things that was added and evolved into the program. So that has been added. There's always sort of an understanding of how courtrooms work and whether the need for certain functions like the jury box and making the notion of a universal courtroom. And a lot of things that happen it's basically having the space. It's going to be kind of odd to say, but having the space almost processes the court proceedings. If you don't have a jury box, you don't have a space that's adequate to have a jury trial. Therefore, people will just sort of sit and wait and not sort of come to the table, have those discussions, have mediations. It's almost the threat, if you will, of having the court space is what keeps the process moving forward, and we see that in a lot of counties. And we have very close experience working with a county where they were developing a jail expansion and a courthouse expansion. And if you look at them individually, it was a much different picture than if you looked at them as a combined solution. And it was sort of the notion of having the court space available to say, well, I'm not just going to sit and bide my time because I know that's going to take months for me to go through the judicial process. By having that courtroom available allows you to accelerate the proceeding, allows you to sort of negotiate and get people out of the jail and get people out of the system faster. So by building in that flexibility, if you will, is sort of and again, it sort of feeds into the efficiency of the system, if that makes sense. As Greg mentioned, and as Liz mentioned, the idea of looking at our forecasting, that was part of the NCSC study. So there was some caseload projections, and again, within Lane County, it's even very unique within the court system, just within the state of Oregon. So we have looked at those forecasts. Those were provided in the original 2016 NCSC study. We did a quick look at that, understanding where we're at today, now that we're 2 years down the road. And there wasn't anything that threw up a red flag to say that providing this flexibility in the court space was something we should not pursue at this point in the project. We feel like that providing that flexibility in the courtroom environment was the right thing to do. And if we have to down the road, look at a different direction, then that's something certainly a design team moving forward could take.
Well, I think at this stage, more information would be helpful. In other words, I just gave you those statistics out of the New York Times, and one federal judge said, well, he had only one jury trial in 18 months, of significant decline in the number of jury trials. Not the number of trials, the number of jury trials, not the number of court appearances where people need to show up and say they're not guilty or say they're working on a mediation or whatever. But my point is, you've got a substantial amount of space, and all I'm asking for are Lane County statistics on the number of jury trials per day, per year, per month, or something like that. Again, a data that shows the ratio of the judge time to the jury time, the number of jurors that were seated, that sort of thing, to give us an idea of whether we're building a courthouse that in fact meets what we see currently and maybe what we project for that. And that would be very helpful. Also on the civil side, same thing. How many cases are filed? How many cases are settled? We need to have juries for all these civil cases. Again, my sort of walking around knowledge is most cases are settled. They're not tried in front of a jury. And maybe you're right, maybe we need a picture of a jury box so that they will realize, well, that's what's gonna happen if you don't settle. Okay, Commissioner Farr was in the queue, and go ahead.
Thank you, and I'm not gonna go into detail regarding the design. I'm not gonna go into detail regarding the design, because that is what you do. And I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Sorenson, because you're an attorney, and you experience, I think you have a reasonable request regarding numbers. There are two things that I'm gonna focus on, and things that I have a little bit more experience with. The first is I was recently a juror, and while the defendant has a fairly comfortable place, hard place, but comfortable place to sit while the jury deliberates, and while the judge has a fairly comfortable place to sit. But I'll tell you what, the jury room is a horrible, horrible place. And if you want 12 angry men and women, put them in one of Liz's jury rooms. And if they weren't angry when they went in, they'll be angry coming out. So and I see that you have a jury space on second floor, or whichever floor that, second courtroom floor, or whichever floor that turns to be. So do all the courtrooms feed into that one jury space? No, and I promised I wouldn't ask questions like that. My comment is that, make sure the jurors are accommodated. So.
No, absolutely. So the plan that shows the jury assembly space, that's the large gathering. So if you have 100, 200 folks that are arriving, that's the main jury space.
Downstairs, okay.
And then on the typical court floor, there is jury rooms, 2 per court floor. Gotcha. So there's individual rooms, and that's kind of the areas that we're not identifying at that level of detail. But they are identified kind of on the exterior walls, okay. So there's views and the opportunity for daylight, so you have a nice environment as you're
and from personal experience, with adequate bathroom space, please.
I think that what Todd just said answered your question a little bit. Each floor has 2 jury deliberation rooms anticipated,
good.
Not 4. Because in recognition of the fact that every case doesn't go to a jury trial.
And then the large space on the one floor was a processing where we all go and say, you're going here, you go home. Correct. We all like to hear it.
Yeah, correct. Today, it's on the lower level of this building, and it's sort of outside security. So in the new building, it would be within the confines of the secure footprint of the
So you mean the jury wouldn't have to walk outside to come back inside? Oh,
the
concept. I love that. The second is more general also, and it's the, Eugene, I was on the city council for 10 years. We planned great streets starting back when Ruth Bascom was mayor in 1994. And I love the thought that the facade, the face, the beautiful face is on 8th Avenue, which is going to be our great street to the river. That's ultimately going to be in, and I'm excited about that concept for my grandchildren. And working toward it is great. But that being said, many people enter our city coming over what is called the Ferry Street Bridge, and the first thing that you see today is you see a big E-Web tower, which is pretty hideous, but it has to be there, I guess. And when Judge Hogan planned the federal courthouse, when that went into place, it was a big stainless steel monolith, and it looked horrible, but as the vegetation grows, it is a welcoming part of the city. I mean, it looks good as you come into the city. As I look at your drawing, you have a parking lot on the entry side of the city, which ultimately could be a parking structure or some other public space. But as you come in on the 7th Avenue heads east, 6th Avenue heads west, so much of the traffic comes down off the off-ramp. And so the first thing you see, really literally the first thing you see is going to be the back of the tall courthouse building. And just my comment there is, as we go through further design, making certain that that is appealing. Because Todd, you said that we're not looking at a 40-year building, we're looking at a 70 to 80-year building. And by then we'll be all in hover cars, I know it, but, or transporting into town rather than driving into town. But, but that being said, what we plan today for that facade is a facade that will be seen for many, many years to come. And general comment. When I came to America, Jim, you were talking about Lego blocks, I love that. When I came to America, I was only allowed to bring one toy with me. And I was 10 years old, and I brought my 28-piece Lego set. So I understand exactly what you're talking about, because I only had 28 pieces. And I had to really, if I wanted to build a fort, I had to be very judicious about how I use those pieces. So it really is a good analogy, Lego. So Excellent presentation. I'm transferring that. Took a few photos because I want to look at it tonight when I'm, just sitting there relaxing, watching The Voice and looking at your presentation. So thank you very much. Excellent.
Okay,
Randy.
Commissioner Williams.
Randy.
Commissioner Farr, just want to point out that we also had conversations in detail with the City of Eugene staff and to discuss issues like their visions for how downtown will develop in the future, the great streets, the notion of the town square, and that sort of influenced some of the proposed or suggested massing. The actual details of final design that would be worked out with whoever the county eventually selects will obviously pay attention to some of your concerns, in terms of views from various vantages, including off-ramps to 6th, off-ramp on 8th, etc.
That is a hallmark of your work. You don't look at it in a vacuum. You look at it from the distance.
Correct.
And Carla, will you look like you wanted to say something?
No, I'm good.
No. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Gary, Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great presentations, very enjoyable to see. The building of something that's at this point somewhat unknown. This is a good direction to head in. I really appreciate my colleagues' comments and questions. I don't have any additional questions other than I like the concept that you've laid out and appreciate that.
Thank you.
Back on the jury trial data, this is New York State court data. So this is New York data, state court data. In 1984, there were 4,000 jury verdicts in New York State, in state court. In 2015, there were 2,000. So a drop of 50% over the period of 1984 to 2015. So that's another, again, that's New York State, and we also had federal data, not Oregon, not Lane County, but it again illustrates my, and I think it's a good thing that the legal system has developed where people will say, hey, it's better to resolve the dispute, and the public part. That gets to my second major inquiry about this process, and that is, if we look at it from the standpoint of a criminal defendant, that's one way to look at all this. But another way to look at it is, what about the people that get a speeding ticket and they're wandering around in the bottom of this building wondering where do they go? Similarly, witnesses in cases, where do they go? There's got to be some sort of customer service location, the welcoming place where all these people are sorted out. You're a juror, you go down there. You're trying to go to a federal courthouse. You're in the wrong courthouse. You need to go down the street. You're trying to go to a city courthouse. Go to the city courthouse. So there's almost an element of a welcoming. I don't know. We need to go as far as having chocolate on a pillow, but we definitely need to look at this from the standpoint of the public that's coming in. Another aspect of the public component of this is, the jury trial, the jury rooms. I would much rather have half as many jury rooms and have them be habitable, because one of my last jury trials, and to put this in some perspective, Mr. Sherwood and I had our sons in grade school at the time. So this really dates this story, and also the judge was Judge Ann Aiken, who was not even a state court judge. She's a federal judge now. But Judge Aiken was convening this trial, and they had the jury. We stopped the trial and put the jury in another jury room, and she convened a mediation. I think the people settled because they wanted to get out of the room. It was so bad. The room was so bad. And I know people have had this experience of being a juror. So you've got to figure out as you look at all this, okay, you're looking at it from the standpoint of the judge, oh, I'd like to have a 12-person jury, I'd like to have this ramp so that the jurors and witnesses could get to their places when they come in, I want this, well, look at it from the standpoint of the public. Are they gonna be welcomed? Is there gonna be signage? Are we going to have the room big enough so that they can use the bathroom?
Yes, Chair Sorenson, Commissioners, you're channeling the conversations we have had amongst ourselves. We have had a number of conversations about everything from wayfinding to really making sure there are service components that can even be utilized without folks having to come through security. If somebody's stopping in just to pay that fine, we have been taking those things into account. And please know with the universal courtroom design, we at Lane County have been working in partnership with the circuit court, the state court function here, and we will bring back that data. And I do think the presiding judge would probably be interested in having a conversation about what she foresees the current need and the ongoing future of the court systems. I would say with this very talented, nationally respected team that we brought in, they have been working directly with the individuals whose services will be provided in this building, and it's their numbers, their thinking, their understanding of current best practices, as well as they're looking at the future. So I would say we can save our time with them and have that conversation with the judges in terms of how they see that work moving forward. But we'll be happy to bring that back and schedule that, because all of that data has fed into what we've been examining.
Let's have another round, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Very short round. You have Pearl Street as a two-way street, which I spend time on Pearl Street a lot more time than I wish I was spending. It takes me almost as long to get from 6th Avenue to 13th Avenue as it does to get from my home in West Eugene to downtown. So if we're, just as an aside, if we're going to two-way Pearl, which makes a great deal of sense, different accommodations for getting around town need to happen.
If I may, Commissioner, we don't control what the city of Eugene decides to do with the streets. And what I will say, that's one of the things. And one of the things that's really that is a challenge with any site for a courthouse is the need to bring in judges in a secure way and give them a secure way to enter the building. A secure, separate way to bring prisoners into the building in a way that can't be blocked by traffic or anything like that. And this site, we wouldn't have chosen to do the things to the streets that are going to happen to the streets there. But I think the city they're looking at the overall city and not looking to accommodate the potential courthouse there. So the two-way on Pearl, I think, is something that's been in the works for a long time, and that has informed the access points to this site in great part.
And downtown Eugene involves, when I was first on the city council, we only just were giving up the idea of a downtown freeway. Remember that one? So, thank you.
Anything further, Gary?
I have nothing.
I'll ask a question about I'm the liaison to the Lane County Law Library Advisory Committee, and there is a massive amount of interest among the Law Library Advisory Committee, which normally doesn't have a lot of excitement in their work. Can you tell me if the scoping, I realize this is not design, can you tell me if the scoping involves the component of a public that is increasingly lawyerless and is putting greater and greater demands on law libraries for access to basic legal information about our laws, our rules, how things are done, and the demand on law libraries nationwide is is mimicking the decline in the number of jury trials. And so more people don't have enough money to go to lawyers, so they're going to law libraries, and the public and lawyer and accountant members of the advisory committee have always been curious about whether their component is part of this. What's the answer?
Chair Sorenson, you named one of the great opportunities this new courthouse has. We've rich conversations about the law library and really building out the self-service elements that include kiosks. We've been looking at the co-location with the family law programming so that it can be pretty significant one-stop shopping for that self-service. It's a chance for us to take great strides and just what you've said. I don't know if you want to talk about national trends or where you're thinking we're going, but it really is a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, well, what Greg has outlined is certainly that is, in conjunction, it is one of the national trends. I mean, it's we're at the forefront of that, providing those pro se services, maybe providing that balance of, the books and the stacks, moving into the kiosk, providing those services. And again, we see a lot of that actually combining the family law, as Greg mentioned. So it is in line with what we're seeing throughout the country. And the law librarian that's here today is very proactive, and we've had a lot of good dialogue with her as well. So we feel like that the direction we're going is sort of in line with what we're seeing nationally, and it is one of those things we'll hang our hat on as a very much a space that's defining kind of the courthouse of the future for Lane County.
What is the timeline for all of this? What you guys are working on this report, we're going to get that in December, I heard that part. What happens next? Is there enough money to build this without asking the voters to give us the money, or is that kind of the end game that before we have to do a design, or do we get the money first? Or I know when I bought a house, I got the money first before I figured out what I could buy. How is this going to work? Do you guys have a recommendation?
Chair Sorenson, I'm afraid you're trying to take some of the surprise away from the December 18th meeting. I think we are going to be bringing to you our plans for, and we think it's timely in preparation for our state ask, which is first in queue within the Chief Justice's budget in terms of courthouse rebuilding. So we will have a state ask. We are looking at the numbers, and it's quite likely there will be an ask of the local voters. The size of that ask is one of the things that we're currently working on to as we get the numbers to feed into that. And we do expect to be bringing you a thorough plan for what we have, what we understand, what we believe we need, and what we see as the path forward to provide both the funding to do this as well as our thinking about how do we assemble the team to really plan this out. So that is what we'll be looking at on December 18th.
Now, is this group, are you guys done now, or are you working on this report?
We're working on the report.
Okay. And then are you done then? And then we're going to try to figure out, county staff will figure out what to recommend going forward for additional design?
Correct.
Okay.
Jim, if you want to jump in on that.
Well, just to back up a little bit about the funding, one of the things here is that historically courthouses have been paid for by local voters. And the costs of courthouses and the state of courthouses within Oregon means that the legislature has provided that the state will provide funding for courthouses for part of the construction of courthouses related, as long as the courts are located there and at least one of their state agency, and will provide funding that's up to, that represents some cost at probably of this building, maybe 40% of the cost of the building. Of course, that means going to the legislature. Lane County, based on their assessment of the need for a replacement courthouse, was placed in the queue fourth in the queue originally because Tillamook, following Jefferson County, Multnomah County, then Tillamook County. Tillamook County has decided they can't, to not pursue a replacement courthouse for financial reasons. And so Lane County is in the position of asking the legislature for those funds. That's what provides this particular piece of emphasis at this time, is because there's a new legislative session, and the question is going to be, are we going to be asking for funds or moving ahead with the project, or will we not? And I think that's what prompts us to be having this conversation with a little more seriousness or urgency now than it does than 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, or 2 years ago.
Will there be secure parking for the judges?
That's in the program right now, yes, that's been a critical part of it.
I think that's one of the real risks we have right now is juror and judge safety.
Yes, sir.
Yes, prisoner transport, juror and judge safety. I think we've talked about a number of things, and the things that happen where crime victims wind up in the presence of the accused because of the nature of the way we move prisoners through the courthouse. It's pretty difficult. There are a lot of challenges to that existing building.
Right. What happens to the existing building?
Under the purchase and sale agreement that we agreed to with the city, if we build a new courthouse, then the city has an option to buy that building, and that option runs for, I think, 5 years after the time we would build it.
To buy the courthouse?
Yes.
Okay.
That was part of their consideration in citing a city hall across the street, was the possibility, if they want to co-locate offices, they could do it across the street and connect them. Following that, there's an expiration period on that, and if we build a replacement courthouse, which we're going to have to at some point, then the city will have that option, and then may or may not take that option, or may inform us beforehand, and at that point we'll have to decide what to do with the building. So far as this project goes, this would be essentially mothballing it or using it for some extra offices, but to make it economic to not operate.
Chair Sorenson, if I may, the city of Eugene was foregoing their phase 2. Their design for their courthouse on the former City Hall lot was their phase 1, in recognition that they were foregoing the opportunity for their phase 2 or phase 3. That was part of the original negotiation for them to have that first right of refusal.
Right. One of the considerations for their agreeing to do it.
Yes.
Okay, anything else on your end? Yes, Mr. Carlin?
Chair Sorensen and Commissioners, I just wanted to touch on that law library issue just for a sec. And that is to make clear that what you've authorized me to do in terms of the legislature is we're seeking policy language that essentially gets attached to the bond issuance. So it's not that dissimilar from a budgetary policy that only lasts for the biennium. It's a piece of legislation that will be just for this bond issuance authorization. And one of the things we're trying to do within that is to get some policy language that allows for the state to cover 50% of the footprint of the law library, for example. So in the previous issuances for Multnomah County and Jefferson County, that was not crystal clear. And so we got a piece of legislation, at least being drafted down in Legislative Council right now, that will attempt to do that.
Okay, good. Okay, well, it sounds like then December 8th, is that the? 18th, December 18th, we'll be reassembling to hear more about this, and I just want to thank all of you for your great work on this, and thank you for answering our questions and concerns.
Fascinating. Thank you.
And now, after we, guess we could go back to Mr. Mokowiecki on any more announcements you have?
I missed one thing on the election.
Okay.
And that is that this is the 20th anniversary of vote by mail. And, as someone who always enjoyed and appreciated the take-home exam, it allows you to be a little bit more deliberative and thoughtful and time to process that. I love this system that we have here where you don't have to, for people that may have challenge with childcare or work schedules and think about how do I get to the polls on election day, that this process here makes our democratic elections so easily accessible and thoughtful in the way that people respond. So we have pins here for commissioners. They say, happy 20th anniversary, Oregon vote by mail. I forgot to hand these out as we were handing stickers out, so you get one of these to celebrate our 20th anniversary. And again, we encourage people to actively participate and register and cast their ballots in the election.
Thank you.
Core part of our democracy. I want to provide a quick update on the Egan Warming Center, and then I'd like to take a few minutes to discuss the downtown camping issues that we've experienced recently. Our staff, county staff, is preparing a contract for use of the Wheeler Pavilion at the Lane Events Center. We've done this in previous years to be used this winter as the county's contribution, one of the county's contributions to the Egan Warming Center in case of winter weather events. In the past years, we've had a 3-month contract with St. Vincent de Paul with the option to amend the contract for another 3 months, and so we're working on that process. We also participate in the Dusk to Dawn program and in the car camping program through St. Vity's and at our.
I just wanted to excuse.
Yeah,
I just
ahead.
want to let you know we've already sent the amendment to Mr. Rickoff.
Okay.
It's through I believe it's through January 18th or 19th of 2019, beginning November 1st.
Is that a revision of the one that we did 6 years ago or 5 years ago?
A revision of last year's.
Of last, so it's been that recent, okay, good.
Yes.
Good.
So yeah, the base contract is 2017, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, good.
It's actually Commissioner Farr, it's actually a facility use agreement, I think is the way.
Yeah.
It's not an actual contract, but that's what it is. And then what we did is to simplify and speed up the process, we simply created a template for an amendment. So it's a 1-paragraph amendment so that we can just, as this rolls, it literally took me, I think, 2 or 3 minutes to amend the contract after Mr. Rickoff said it, so.
Thank you. Pardon my interruption.
Yeah, I'm sorry, excuse me, I didn't mean to do that, Mr. Patrick.
No, that's okay. You actually helped me because I'm looking for an email here.
So the
that
first
I'm-
question closed there, I was not able to use their
Yes.
basement.
There it is. Okay, so what I'd like to do is provide an update to the board on the activity related to the camping that's been occurring over the past few weeks at the Butterfly Lot and around the Public Services Building. I'd like to break the update into sort of 2 components. One is what has happened, particularly over the course of the past few days, and the work to identify an alternate location and relocate folks. And then the second part of the update to discuss sort of where we're at and concepts moving forward. Given the discussions, particularly the City of Eugene's discussions about, and the City Council's action to cite a Dusk to Dawn operation at the City Hall block. So I'm going to take the first part and just talk about the last few days. So we had, last week, we had over 100 campers downtown, largely camping around the Butterfly Lot and then moving in over to the PSB along Pearl and on 8th Street. There were numerous impacts, including health and safety related issues. We have from our facilities and the cleaning crew that we hired, pictures of human feces and other significant health related issues on the property. There were a number of safety concerns. There were access to public service issues, particularly on Friday, as individuals began to set up tents around the public services building. We had calls from residents who were coming in to drop off property taxes or come access a service, and they called us and said, I came here to access the service, but I turned around and went home because I was fearful to come into the public service building. We had Lane County employees that were concerned and fearful because of the activity. and their sort of ability to move in and out of the building to conduct their work. So all of these issues presented some significant challenges. We were working with residents and discussing this with we were hearing significant concerns from downtown property owners and businesses, impacts to businesses downtown, their concerns for health and safety, as well as concerns from property owners in the surrounding area. So we had been working over the last several weeks, Lane County has been working to identify an alternative solution because of the decision out of the Ninth Circuit Court related to the the recent case in Boise from the Ninth Circuit that restricts our ability to remove individuals who are camping in undesignated locations. We didn't, at the time, we have not had an alternative location to send people that is a non-religious based organization running a shelter or camping opportunity.
Interjection, undesignated on public land.
Yes, on public land. And so we didn't have that outlet. We became aware, I became aware 2 weeks ago today that the city of Eugene was going to be proposing, as they did 2 weeks ago tomorrow, the use of the City Hall site for a dusk to dawn operation. We've obviously been in discussions with the city of Eugene for going on a couple years now, 1.5 to 2 years, around a land exchange and all of the work that has gone into that effort. So that was new. We expressed concerns about the use of that site for what I think are some obvious reasons in terms of our desires to, as we're nearing the final stages of closing the land exchange deal, and that is going to be, that property will become Lane County's property, and we've been in the process of working with the city to utilize the City Hall block for parking, because there's a significant parking
We're gonna
need.
have to close our meeting if Commissioner Farr leaves.
Okay,
So
I'll pause.
well, that's okay, we'll wait. Might, well,
Do we, yeah, all right.
why don't we just take a break for 10 minutes and we'll, what do you, oh,
Okay.
okay, sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, no problem. I guess we won't take a break, so go ahead.
Okay, so, sorry, where was I?
I wouldn't have answered that.
No, it's no problem, understood. Just trying to figure out where I was there. It's the City Hall site, so when we became aware the day before the city announced their concept of siting a dusk to dawn operation at the City Hall site, we expressed concern. I expressed concern about that based on all of the work that we have done over the course of the past couple of years on that, as well as the fact that we were moving in the direction of utilizing that property in the short term until we construct a courthouse for temporary parking to meet the parking demands, as well as the concerns that exist related to that site, that there are no other services available at that site. We certainly understand that both the city and the county are constrained in terms of our ability. There are not a lot of good locations for these types of operations. So everyone's been actively trying to work to find those. Our concern is simply that site is just not a good one for the downtown core, for businesses, for property owners, for people trying to access public services, as well as for individuals who would be utilizing the shelter services, because there are no, that location in the downtown core generally does not provide access to other critical services in adjacent areas, including meals, including laundry services, charging stations, other services that individuals would need. So we express that concern, but as I say to our staff, if you bring a problem to us in one hand, you need to bring a solution in the other. And so I didn't feel as though we could obstruct or get in the way of or strongly oppose that concept if we didn't have a better alternative solution. And at that moment, 2 weeks ago, we didn't have a better solution. So We've been actively working, and last week identified a Lane County-owned property. Lane County acquired, I'm going to hand out maps here to commissioners, and for the 3 commissioners here, I've marked out in kind of blue pen the site in question, and I'll just describe what this is. This is a property that's approximately at 525 North Highway 99. You see Highway 99 running north and south, and to the east is the property Lane County owns, and you see 4 red dots. Those red dots represent essentially the properties that Lane County own. There are 3 tax lots that I boxed out for you: tax lot 1400, tax lot 1600, and tax lot 1700. And I'll start from the back. Tax lot 1700, Lane County owns all 3 of these tax lots. We acquired them in 2017 through a tax foreclosure. 1700 is, they each are about a half acre. So the total, that's not exactly, but for the purpose of our discussion, we'll call each of them approximately a half acre, to total about 1.5 acres between those 3 properties. The 1700 tax lot is approximately 8,000 square feet of a warehouse building that's leased to a business, been leased to this business for over 30 years. Their name is Active Transfer. We met with them, Commissioner Farr, who represents this district, Captain Sam Kamkar from EPD, Christy Hammett from the City of Eugene's manager's office, and Jeff Turk and I met on Friday at approximately noon with this business to discuss the concept that we moved forward with. So that's that. That tenant has been leasing, and we are on a month-to-month lease with that tenant. They do transport, port-to-port transport. There's very little equipment or use of the actual facility, that building that they do, but as you can see, they park their trucks there. The 1600 tax lot is, we've allowed that tenant to use, but it is not leased. We don't have a lease, but it is utilized to park their trucks. And then the 1400 tax lot includes a vacant building that has a red dot on it there in the front. It used to be a restaurant and then was a security company. And the back area with the red dot and that I've marked out in the blue ink is the area that we've identified and set up currently as an emergency stopgap camping operation, an alternative to the downtown camping that was occurring. So we have moved nearly all of the campers. So we identified this on Friday. We very quickly moved. Lane County, it was frankly phenomenal. The people that stepped up and the work that was done in short order. I'm just going to call out a few individuals. Chief Deputy Cliff Harold, Special Deputy Tim Chase, Greg Rickoff, our operations chief, Dan Hurley, our Public Works Director, Michael Johns, our Public Services Manager, our General Services Manager, Herman Thomas, our Maintenance Supervisor, Assistant Public Works Director Lance Inglet, Mike Finch, our Technology Services Director, Melissa Crane, our GIS and Applications Manager, Commissioner Farr, Laurel O'Rourke, and Linda Bravo, who are community service workers in our Health and Human Services Department, Karen Gaffney, our Health and Human Services Director, Devin Ashbridge, our Public Information Officer, Haley Natho, and our Special Waste Technician, Jason Smith, David Clark, and Dominic Espirito, and Nick Harris and Trent Howard from Public Works, Road Maintenance crew, and Steve Dingle, our County Counsel, as well as many other folks from the City of Eugene, Captain Sam Kamkar, Lieutenant Doug Mozan, the Eugene and Springfield Fire were outstanding.
Elena Domingo, yes.
Elena Domingo from the mayor's office, and a number of other individuals. All these folks stepped up. On Friday, we had Mackenzie Commercial out there working on setting up a fence. We had the fire department out there identifying how many people could be there and how to set up the site. Captain Cam Carr was phenomenal in helping us coordinate all of that and with experience in setting up these sites. We had porta potties out there Friday afternoon, 10 porta potties. There, I believe now are 2 ADA accessible porta potties. We have EPD cameras on site to monitor activity. We're working on setting up permanent cameras. There are sanitation stations for hand washing. And we ordered 30 arbovitas to add some screening tarps, thank you, tarps and plantings to sort of make this aesthetically look nice, and all the fencing was put up. So that was all set up Friday evening and Saturday. By Saturday at approximately 3 p.m., the camp was ready to go. We had marked out spaces, 8 by 8 foot spaces and 9 foot clearances for emergency services. We had donations from county employees on their personal dime. Mr. Rickoff went and purchased tents and sleeping bags.
It was an anonymous gift.
Yeah, not anymore. And so all of that was done. We moved, LTD worked with us along with our waste management staff to move campers from downtown Saturday evening. I think we had around 30 campers Saturday evening, and then Sunday we continued that, and the remainder of the campers were moved. As of yesterday, there were over 100 campers there. It's a large site. That number is likely fluctuating, and we've really tried to cap that at that number. We don't want it to grow above that. There's one individual who's acting as the camp leader for the moment, and EPD and the sheriff's office and county staff are actively working to coordinate all of that, along with St. Vincent de Paul. This location, as you can see, and I'll pass also around, these are, I only have one of each of these, so I'll pass these around. You can see what the site generally looked like before it was, people were there. It's an enclosed area on Highway 99. Commissioner Farr did great work in doing outreach with surrounding businesses and residents and property owners and addressing concerns. That's been really critical in bringing those folks around. One of the reasons that this site, as quickly as this has moved, and as phenomenal as it has been to see this, our organizations and county leaders and city officials come together and make this happen in such a short period of time. It's also a really great location, we believe, because of its proximity to other services. Across the street, you have the St. Vincent de Paul Lindholm Center, which provides 3 meals a day, laundry services, charging stations. You have other services provided by St. Vincent de Paul. A Dusk to Dawn site is down the road. You have sponsors that's there, a phenomenal program and campus that they have there. So that is all in operation now. I think that we also have an incident command system set up. We're in joint incident command with the City of Eugene. So Lance Inglet, our Assistant Public Works Director, is the county incident commander, and the city incident commander is Doug Mozan, a lieutenant from EPD. So before we had that incident command set up 2 weeks ago, or was it 2.5 weeks ago, we said we need to get incident command because the city was doing stuff related to the butterfly lot, and we weren't coordinated. We now have a command center set up in the first floor of the Public Services Building. People worked round the clock through the weekend. The vast majority of these people are non-represented employees who didn't get compensated for their work over the weekend. They came in early, they stayed late, and they got this done to solve a community challenge. So I want to just, for a moment, reflect on these 3 core behaviors we talk about in Lane County: a passion to serve, a drive to connect, and a focus on solutions. And I saw it happening all weekend as people were not compensated for their work, and they didn't care about that. They just wanted to solve a community challenge. So great work there, and we really appreciate everyone's efforts.
So I think that Mr. Moker-Heisky is being a little bit humble, and I just want to say that all of the staff that was working this weekend was very appreciative that he was there as long or longer than any of us and was doing, you know, the actual setup work and hands-on. And so that was really appreciated, and I don't think something that, you know, every organization would see from its top leader. So that did not go unnoticed by staff, even if he is not willing to share everything.
We had a lot of servant leadership. Dan Hurley was out chalking, you know, we were moving porta potties and chalking up. So there was a lot of folks who just said, we're not going to ask anyone else to do something that we wouldn't do ourselves. So that gives you hopefully a picture of what happened, very largely orderly and largely without incident. But there's, you know, it's a large camp that's established. Again, this is a temporary solution, and we need to now start having conversations about how to make this emergency stopgap measure, which is better than what was occurring downtown. It's improved health, safety, sanitation, security for both campers and for businesses and the general public, but it is not a long-term solution, and we need to work on transitioning to a better longer-term option. I will also say that, so let me pivot to the second part of the conversation, unless there are questions about that activity.
Yeah, I have a question about the map you handed out. The tax lots, the ones with the dots are the ones that the county owns. 1,400 is the property we're talking about right now. Is the building part of tax lot 1,400?
Yes.
It is.
And we own it, and
Okay.
it's vacant.
The Flying Scott Drive-In.
Okay, is the, is tax lot 1501 just a strip, or is that, what is 1501 on the map?
Yeah, it's a small strip. I'm not sure who owns that. 1501, and then
I think it
1800 is the road.
It might, 1501 might be an access for lot 1601.
It could be, yeah, it could be an easement for 1601. 1601 is operated by a nonprofit organization, and so because they had nonprofit status and they didn't have to pay taxes, there was no tax lien. Even though the property owner was the same, it was occupied by a nonprofit. That was recently purchased, as we understand it, by a trust out of Portland.
1601?
1601,
Okay.
and so we are, I'm going to touch on that, 1601, because we feel like that's a critical property to sort of continue to look at it as the potential of coordinating or acquiring in some way.
What's the status of the building on tax lot 1400?
It is vacant, and it is locked and not accessible.
Is it habitable? Is there a bathroom? Is there a kitchen?
If I can, Commissioner, there's,
No, 1400.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a former restaurant. It's got all the amenities of a restaurant.
I think the concern was, that I've heard expressed and that I would share, is that the reluctance to open that up because you can't see what's going on inside of the building.
Okay.
There may be, we don't know that exactly. We have someone who knows it.
Okay.
I don't know that.
Okay. Is 1300 separated from 1400 at Highway 99 by a barrier, or is that just a is that a demarcation? The
I'm sorry.
1300.
I can answer that. You can walk
yeah.
right of the angle where the car is parked. You can walk across there, but there is a fence to the what is the east of the car there that runs along the blue line.
Okay. All right.
1300 is a battery exchange.
Okay. And is 1501, that parking area in front of 1400, is that parking area part of 1400?
Yes.
Okay. But it's far enough back of the highway where the Eugene Police Department cameras are located.
The cameras are located
right at that little, almost at the angle.
Yeah, where the two boundaries come together.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
8-degree angle.
Is there power for the residents there or not?
We have electricity. There is water on site on a
It's on the punch list to work on,
Okay.
the to-do list.
They have no electricity right now. They're asking for places.
And they're
to charge
asking for
phones.
that.
There are charging stations across the street at the Lindholm Center.
What's the status of 1600? You mentioned that it is used by the trucking or transfer company that's at 1700, but it's, and obviously on the picture we have, there's trucks there. they're just using it and we're letting them use it, and do they need it?
Well,
this is my question.
Yeah, they park their semis there currently. They were, I will say, when we went and spoke to the tenant, the business owner at 1700, extremely gracious, and there were some impacts to their business because they used, you can sort of see this
Part of 1400.
as their truck turnaround. And so we've cut that off, and we said, is that going to impact your operations? And the owner said,
It takes more skill on the driver's part, but no.
right.
Yeah.
So yes, we really have been trying to work with that business owner because they've been so accommodating to this issue. There is a fence that we set up, Mackenzie Commercial set up a fence there that separates, creates that physical separation between 1400 and 1600. You can see where that blue line is.
Yeah.
And then we put tarps across it. So they're really, you can't, from 1600 and 1700, you can't see into the camp
Right.
location.
It looks better than it's ever looked.
And what's the status of the building at 1700?
It's inside, it's largely vacant, and as we understand it from the business owner, it's not utilized.
They're not a warehouse. They don't warehouse anything in there. It's huge. I mean, it's a big,
Yeah.
dry, empty warehouse.
Yeah.
And it's not. They're a transfer company, so they take trailers, and they move the trailers around. So people will drop off a loaded trailer, and they'll use one of their tractors to move the trailer.
What the owner said is that they do, most of their work now is port to port, and so this is really just for, storing their trucks.
In
And
no
they're
small
leasing
part,
it.
just because they've been there for 30 years.
Right.
Yeah, and they're leasing it from us, or renting it.
On a month-to-month lease, yeah. And so this is something, again, as we sort of pivot now into the looking to the future, what we're trying to do is say we need to have a permanent solution on the table and as we're managing these kind of temporary measures that are addressing some immediate concerns, we need to keep our eye on the permanent solution. Of course, we know through the TAC report, the Technical Assistance Collaborative from Boston, that the commissioners were presented a few weeks ago, a permanent low barrier public shelter is a critical component of creating a network of services to solve this homelessness challenge we're dealing with in our community.
If I may, permanent housing is our solution. That's what we're all aiming toward, commissioners. But it's down the road before we have permanent housing. So this is absolutely temporary, and this is what I'm telling you, what I'm telling the people who live and have businesses around there. This is a temporary situation. And while I have that in mind, if you look at this one photo right here, you see the proximity of the Value Inn Motel. It is from here to that wall, away from the first tent, literally. And significantly, if you look at the larger map, the Value Inn Motel, there is a direct line, and it's the only thing in between the Dusk to Dawn program, the Winter Strategies program, and this facility. Consequently, it's a highway, potentially a highway for people who are moving back and forth. So Mr. Mokrahysky has done what it takes to disrupt the flow there, but working with the owner-operator of that motel is essential. I've visited with him no less than 5 times since we started this, and he gets calmer and calmer each time, but he always iterates that noise, particularly for the people who stay in that end unit, and this is a motel that people, for instance, stay when they catch a plane at 5 o'clock the next morning. It's one of the closer motels to the airport, and it's an active motel, an active night room rent motel. So it's essential that we pay close attention to the people who are actively working their businesses, because the important thing to understand is that while we are in some ways responding to the businesses downtown, the Shed and Citizens Bank, the Citizens Building, the other businesses downtown who were very present at LGAC on Friday morning, these are also businesses. And while the Shed has feces surrounding it, this business also has feces surrounding it. It's no different. The Shed and the Value Inn have exactly the same level of importance as far as we're concerned.
Yeah. Well, if we can get more screening on that business, that would certainly help, and it looks like he's already been working on that. I saw the screening, I thought it was pretty good. But, you know, I don't have a business right next door to it either, and I
Commissioner,
certainly understand that.
a little higher screening on that side has been requested, so that's.
Yeah. Gary?
Signage, you know, you have people that are falling on hard times and they're here, but that doesn't mean that they can't be well behaved or given a little direction. So perhaps signage there that, you know, out of courtesy, however it would be phrased, but be mindful that noise carries. And we have a business over here, and, you know, I don't know how you put all that in a sign, but, you know, quiet zone maybe, I don't know. But,
and if I may, there is an active participant who keeps the noise down. It's, you know, there's a historical character, King Solomon, who really kept control of many things in many ways. Well, there's a man who really acted in that fashion out there, from a stolen or a missing makeup kit all the way to, hey guys, there are people living nearby.
We established camp rules and expectations, and we're having a sign made by our sign shop to post that. And we asked all of the individuals as they were brought into the camp over the last few days, we've asked for them to provide their name, their signature, their date of birth, and the last four of Social Security, and sign saying you acknowledge these rules that we've said. The rules include no harassment, discrimination, violence, no use of non-prescription drugs or alcohol at the site, or they can't be, you can't have non-prescription or drugs or alcohol at the site. You know, use the trash receptacles, use the bathrooms, come in and out through the front gate, you know, respect noise, keep your things to get, you know, be careful when you cross the road, all that stuff. So we're doing those measures. It's important to acknowledge this is not a rest stop. This is not a dusk to dawn operation. This is not an organized through the city's code operation like some other things are. This is, you know, as we've said, an emergency stopgap that we've tried to put some rules and boundaries around to make it better than what we had down here. So if I may, Mr. Chair, just sort of pivot into where we go from here. We have, so we're continuing to think about the permanent solution, which is Commissioner Farr said, we need more supportive housing, permanent supportive housing. That is expensive and takes time to develop. So we got to keep working on that. We also need to identify a permanent low barrier public shelter. That's part of the system of care along with permanent supportive housing. That's going to take a little bit of time and resources to get to. So what do we do here in the interim to improve the current state? There's also this continued discussion of whether or not the city is going to continue a dusk to dawn do a dusk to dawn site at the City Hall block, which we do not support and which we've expressed concern about. And we now have said we believe we have an alternative solution. So 2 weeks ago we didn't have, when we became aware of it there on the spot, we didn't have a better alternative. We believe we do have a better alternative today at the Highway 99 site. And so we're working with our partners at the city and having discussions about the potential use of the Highway 99 site for something that could last a little bit longer and that is more structured and organized and mitigates some of the current concerns even more, is better for surrounding businesses and property owners and better for the folks who are there than what we currently have. And so we put forward some concepts and proposals to the city last night, and we're going to work through those. But one of our requests is that we look at that interim measure at utilizing this Highway 99 site as an interim more organized operation to alleviate the need for a sanctioned camping at the City Hall site and in downtown Eugene, where there's not access directly to the types of services that these folks need. So there's a lot more to that, and there's a number of criteria that the county feels really strongly about that I think the city has historically also supported. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to work together towards those, again with an eye towards identifying a permanent low barrier public shelter, because that's the sort of the end goal we need to keep our eye on. So I think I'll pause there, and I'd like to just gauge, certainly if you have additional questions, but I'd like to gauge your thoughts on all of this and your feelings around particularly the City Hall site and our concerns with that and its potential use as dusk to dawn, and the concept of the Highway 99 site being something for an interim period that is a little more organized and structured to alleviate the need for a downtown operation.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all who had a hand in making this happen. I'm supportive of it, 100%. The proposed site from the city of Eugene, the old City Hall lot, impractical for a host of reasons. It's the lack of those services that many of these people require, and so having Lindholm out in that area, sponsors is there. There's an opportunity to network with those folks that really have the ability to have an impact in serving these folks that are here. I think that's the best shot that they have. They've got a place that's safe. They have services that are accessible. My only concern, and it is minor, and that is, the adjacent businesses or property owners, but that can be mitigated with, fencings and blinds and those kinds of things. So I think you just need to be highly commended for making this happen. Very, very pleased about this. This is a humanitarian crisis that we're in, and this is an opportunity to help folks and display a great deal of cooperation among public service providers and private service providers. I just think this is a win-win, and I'm very happy that this is taking place. Thank you, Stefan.
Thanks. It is a win-win, but it's not without serious issues. If I've circled on this map right here, this is an older picture, but on that map right there, that is the Lindholm Service Center. So that's where, that's the only actual day center for people who don't have for homeless people in Eugene. And there are showers, and it's heavily used. Consequently, Highway 99, which is a state highway, has that spot is a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit. People don't go 45 on there. There have been 2 fatalities at that location over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. So, this is not without its serious problems. And if you look at tax lot 4003 right behind the Lindholm Center, that's a residence. The family lives right there. And that's, within almost, if the Lindholm Center hadn't grown up, you'd be able to look right into there. On the other side of the Burlington tracks there, all of those tax lots are residences. So there are lots and lots and lots and lots of people living very, very close. And there are public parks very, very close. That being said, in talking to the people who live and have businesses around there, many of the issues that they cite are existent issues that are there today. And it's because of the nature of the industrial corridor, in part, and it's because of the nature of that it is a concentration of services in that area. It is absolutely a concentration already of services in that area. And Commissioner, you know how people feel about that, whether you live in Whitaker or whether you live in Bethel. Why don't we have a greater geographic dispersal? Why don't we put something in Tugman Park? Why don't we put something at the Amazon Community Center? That question was brought up on Friday. Well, we have to consider all of those things, because concentrating everything in one place is not going to solve the issue. In fact, it's going to concentrate the issue, and it's just like cramming a jury into a room. Sane people become crazy if you're putting too many things happening in the same place. That being said, that makes this even more important to understand that this is temporary. It's not going to be there for a long period of time, and not just because our county health officer says you can't keep these things in one place for any length of time because of the sanitation issue. And it's not without the total and absolute necessity of me not taking the 3-day weekend that I'd planned, but having 3 12-hour work days working in the area, talking to folks, and it's not over. I'm going to need to continue, we all are going to need to continue to respond to what are the problems, address the issues as they come up, and also it's significant that we mitigate issues that were there before we made this decision, before this decision was made. So if you look at, looking on this picture right here, you can't quite see it, on the other side of the Value Inn, you can see it on the aerial map. There's a large copse. There are 4 or 5 trees. There's lots of undergrowth. It's on the St. Vincent de Paul property. Well, for instance, we need to go in there and cut down the undergrowth. So it's not a nesting place for people who want to do illicit, off-the-chart things. The important thing to understand is that right now the people who are camping here with rules, before they were camping there with rules, they were camping elsewhere with no rules.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
And that's the significant difference for anybody who has any issues with the fact that we're giving people a place to stay. They're staying with rules. And by and large, I was there at 9 o'clock last night. By and large, they're abiding by the rules. They're quiet. They listen to the person who is the de facto chief of the area. And they go to that person for assistance. They're asking for a few amenities, nothing that is going to cost a great deal of money, and this is not a place to stay for the rest of, for a long period of time. It's not a comfortable place. Oh my gosh, no, this is not comfortable. I wouldn't want to, I camp, but the folks living in tents there are camping the way it was raining on Sunday night. They're living in a tent, and nobody wants that. So it's temporary. We need to make sure that we're focusing on better places for people to live and for permanent housing and supportive housing. So that being said, the effort that went into this on Friday, I happened to be at a meeting that Mr. Mocker High School was at that morning, where business owners and other people, not just business owners, were saying, hey, we're disgusted by what we're seeing and we're afraid for our customers. That precipitated this decision. When I went out there, we heard from the LGAC at 8:30 in the morning, and 6 hours later, I saw toilets rolling in there. That's how quickly Mr. Mokarheisky, Mr. Rickoff, Mr. Dingle, and other staff members were there. And I saw people who do have desk jobs, typically. Nobody here really has a desk job, with the sleeves rolled up, pushing. I got a picture of him pushing a toilet. So, it was a great effort to do it, with the understanding, the caveat always that this is absolutely temporary. This is not where we're going to permanently house, where anybody wants to be permanently housed. So it's important to know that the work goes on. The work isn't over. In fact, in many ways, it's just begun. And from here, I've canceled the rest of my appointments for the rest of the day, and I'm going to be out there once again talking to the people in the neighborhood and making certain that anything that comes up is addressed as it comes up.
Thank you very much. I'll say a couple things in response to your question. First of all, I think it's a phenomenal effort, not only by you, but by the other county and city staff, to jump in and, as you put it, have a problem, but also have a solution, and really make the solution come forward. Also, I think the numbers that you gave were very educational about the number of people that are on the site and the land ownership of who owns what land in the area. That's all very helpful to the public's understanding of all of this. I think the matter of the relationship between the city and the county, I might have a slightly different perspective on it. As I understand it, the city was planning to move ahead with this, city, what I'll call the city, ex-city hall site, independent of all of this. That they've been talking about that for maybe weeks. And I don't know how much we were involved in their decision, nor do I really know how much they were involved in this decision. Sounds like they were very cooperative with what's going on Highway 99. If we have the numbers from the TAC, and that acronym, I can't remember, what is it?
Technical Assistance Collaborative.
Technical Assistance Collaborative. So the TAC that the local jurisdictions basically hired to give information to us about the homeless. Having 100 people in some sort of emergency housing, albeit low emergency housing, that does put a dent in the problem. It doesn't solve a problem in any way, but it does put a dent in the problem, and it's yet another one of these tools in the toolbox. You know, we have these idea of more permanent low-income housing, certainly the Homes for Good and all of the nonprofits that run low-income housing, but we also have these emergency programs that look more and more like tents in an area. So we have different, you know, we're all doing, I think a lot of us are doing what we can. I guess I see this as a really great thing, because these are 100 people that were having a lot of problems, that a few of those problems, not all of them, but a few were solved by this. So I view it as a positive thing. In terms of where do we go from here, I certainly would like to see more information about these other properties and buildings. If 1,700 isn't being used, and if the owners of that, the renters of that site were renting from the county, and we can keep them in business and they can move their trucks around in the smaller space that they're being given, and yet that building, which, you know, again, to me looks like almost as big as the entire 100 sites that are currently being used by tents, that's a huge amount of interior space. And so one idea for working with the city is, well, they were going to spend money on this. Well, this is money that maybe we could have a rehab of this, and I'll leave it to you guys as experts, relative to me, experts, you know, on whether or not that actually, you know, has some similar for the building at 1400. It might not be a building that could be used for housing, but it could be a place where people could make food. It could be a place where people use the bathroom. It could be a place where they get access to services, or at least the beginning of services, showers, and take some of the heat off of the Lindholm Center. Another idea that on this map that I think should be considered is, it's commonly said that local governments really don't have much of a say over you know, speed limits and state highways. I know anytime our rural commissioners, you know, start asking if the traffic could be slowed down somewhere, they're immediately told, well, you know, there's this commission and there's all kinds of decisions made by other people than the commissioner about the speed limit. Maybe we could get some flagging, some additional signage. You know, people are going to go back and forth across that street a lot more, and we know that there's been deaths along there. I've been approached to many times, can you do something about this? And I would say that the usual answer is not really, but now with the number of people involved, I definitely think the city of Eugene that administers that portion, and ODOT, that some signage, at least slowing people down temporarily, maybe even putting up a crosswalk. I don't know how much money that would all cost, and obviously it's outside of our jurisdiction, it's either ODOT or the state, but I mean, I just think it's horrible that people are potentially mowed down by people trying to get to the airport, or just the trucking traffic along the 99 corridor from I-5 up to Courthouse. I mean, this is a major trucking corridor, and that's the reason the speed limit's set where it is. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Chair Sorenson, Commissioners, we're working to actually get the mobile sign units up there, even as we speak, in both directions to caution the drivers to slow down, and that the city's already started the work for a permanent crosswalk in this area, because it's exactly as you described. So those plans are well underway. It's not instantaneous or imminent, but it's well underway. We've really pushed for having the temporary signage the temporary electronic signage out there as soon as we can. I hope we might have a good report from Commissioner Farr, should he be out there this afternoon.
Yeah, and maybe, I don't know who issues the speeding tickets along there. Is it the state troopers? Is it the county? Is it, who does the law enforcement there?
The City of Eugene.
Well, maybe we could ask them to put additional enforcement and presence, because we know that police presence often will lower speeds, at least for me it does.
So may I, I know Commissioner Williams has a question. I just wanted to, so we are working actively with the City of Eugene and ODOT on the traffic related issues. I just wanted to address the potential use of the tax lot 1700, and really appreciate Commissioner Sorenson you bringing that up. It's something that we've discussed a little bit with our partners in the business community, and how do we work with that business and see, is there a better location or operation for them to conduct their business and then start to consider some other use for that. And we also, as I mentioned, are sort of exploring the dynamics with the 1601, which was recently purchased, to see if that could be acquired. We then have about 2 acres right here. And the point I just want to make is, let's really start thinking about this as an opportunity to create a campus. Think about sponsors, for example. When we were doing the 14th at Oaks project with sponsors and Homes for Good and parole and probation, and remember the issue that's in a dense residential neighborhood. Remember the response from residents when they first heard about it? They were really upset. And then remember there were some community meetings, and EPD went, and EPD told the residents in the surrounding area, do you know how many calls we get from sponsors' properties? Like none. We don't get calls because it's a campus. They take responsibility. Now that's permanent housing or transitional housing but those are offenders. Those are ex-offenders. So that model though works when we look at providing, as opposed to sort of these one-off locations where we site tents, thinking about how do we create a campus that has shelter opportunities, that has meals, that has laundry and charging stations and social access to services, mental health, substance abuse, job training services, so that this is about connecting individuals to services in a small area and then moving them on to more permanent housing and other opportunities. So you bring up your point, Commissioner Sorenson, raises the potential opportunity there are likely dynamics here around zoning or environmental or other things that Commissioner Farr talked about, the density of these activities in an area. But there's also an opportunity to improve property, to add structure and accountability, and to look at this as in a holistic way. And so I just want us, as we continue to manage the temporary interim dynamics, that we think about the potential really positive opportunities we have with this property or maybe some other moving forward. Again, if we think about this in a holistic way.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this topic?
I just have one piece.
Okay.
So I'm looking at 1800 here, which appears to be a street or an easement. So that's also an intersection with 99. All intersections under Oregon law, is my understanding that they are crosswalks. So there should be not too much difficulty to actually put crosswalks in the highway there. That's something we need
on 99?
Yes, we need to appeal to ODOT. We or the city of Eugene or collectively, but appeal to ODOT for crosswalks or a crosswalk at that intersection.
From 1501 across the street to Lindholm.
I would think, yeah, if you, I'm assuming that's west of 1501, would put pretty much adjacent to the Lindholm.
Mm-hmm.
And
the
again,
Lindholm building is this white roof you can see right there to the west of
okay.
to the west
Yeah,
highway.
well, if they use that western boundary of 1800 as a crosswalk, because am I not correct, Counselor, that intersections are crosswalks.
Yeah, but I don't know that that's a recognized
Street. Might be just a
I think that's
Private road, it's a privately owned road.
That's why I think that's why they're.
It didn't look improved to me, but it did look like an intersection.
I think it was basically it was an easement. I think it's an easement of necessity to provide access so that that other parcel is not landlocked in the back.
I guess for me to jump to the chase here is that perhaps a letter from the county and from the city of Eugene to ODOT requesting paint in the street. I think we should give it a shot.
And
I overheard a conversation between a City of Eugene official and ODOT, and that stretch of Highway 99 is, as we sit here, is being transferred in jurisdiction from the state to the City of Eugene. So even by now it may be signed. I mean, it's supposed to be signed this week, so it is City of Eugene thoroughfare now, under City of Eugene jurisdiction. And my understanding is that they do have, there's the technology, and there is also the funding available to actually install a crosswalk there. I think it's probably going to take city council action.
We certainly have encouraged, that was one of my big concerns, liability-wise. We've encouraged people to use the crosswalks, but it's important to remember, I think, that it needs to be one of these more developed crosswalks, or else people are going to have a false sense of security.
Like the one you see on East Main in Springfield.
Or the one that's down here on Franklin, across from the apartment building, down by Burrito Boy. One that has to, where the people hit the lights come on. This needs more than just paint on the pavement.
Okay, any more on the topic of the maps, the homeless
The last thing,
facility?
the last thing I'll just share is that part of the reason that we had this really challenging dynamic on the Butterfly lot is that there is no curfew. The city has established a curfew at the park blocks, and we have a curfew at the public, at the Wayne Morris Free Speech Plaza. There is not a curfew outside of the plaza or on the PSB, and there's not a curfew on the Butterfly lot. And so I think we just have to be aware of that and think about, we now have an alternative location, but what we want to do is avoid that from happening again, given the fact that we're making all these investments in better solutions for individuals to be safe and organized in a camp location, as well as the fact that our plan here in the next few months is to transfer properties so that the city will purchase the Butterfly lot. They'll then own the Butterfly lot, the park, and you remember the park square is the town square that the city is pursuing. So I think, some thought given to that dynamic around, what policies need to be considered going forward.
And I may have an agenda team request surrounding that.
Okay, so anything further on county administration announcements?
I think that's enough.
Okay, very good. If we move county council announcements down after everything, are you okay with that? Or?
I'm fine with that, Commissioner.
Okay, so taking it down to the next item would be Commissioner Business. Any announcements?
All made.
All made, okay. 8B, agenda team requests.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I have two. One of them is something that Mr. Mokrahysky just touched on. In the Free Speech Plaza, the City of Eugene's park blocks, we do have currently we have a curfew. That they match. The city park blocks and the Free Speech Plaza have a similar curfew. I'd like an agenda team request to have a discussion regarding a curfew to match the same curfew in the other four quadrants of that intersection on the Butterfly parking lot there, what's commonly known as the Butterfly parking lot. So a discussion regarding matching the curfew there with the surrounding lots.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll ask Mr. Mokrahysky to make note of that when he does the summary of the review of assignments. Any other agenda team requests or work session requests?
The second one
Yeah, go
And
ahead.
this is just, I've learned this particular nomenclature, language. So, Mr. Markowski, we've been discussing this for the last 40 minutes or so, the best and highest use of the county-owned property on Highway 99, the tax lots we were just talking about. What is the best and highest use of those properties, including the existing structures?
Yeah, maybe Mr. Turk could make a review of what we do own along there and have a work session just on the properties in the area from what would that be, Highway 99 north of what? The railroad tracks? Railroad?
That'd be west of the railroad tracks.
No, I mean the main railroad tracks that you cross over to.
Oh, okay, that's, yes,
Yeah.
for.
From Schnitzer Steel north, essentially, along 99. In the vicinity of the Lindholm Center and the property that we've been discussing earlier in the meeting, tax lot 1400. That's great, that'll really help us. Anything further? Okay, so we're now down to review of assignments. And we'll ask Mr. Bokerheisky to review the assignments.
So the Commissioner Fires to request the first one to bring forward an item regarding a curfew at the Butterfly PSB properties that would match the park blocks, the existing curfews at the park blocks and plaza. That would, I think, would require an ordinance and a couple readings, so we can bring that forward on a schedule that works with future board meetings.
Yeah, I'm, if I can, Mr. Bokerheisky, I pulled the thing. I'd be prepared to do at least bring forward the initial proposal for the ordinance next week. I've got the board packet here, if that's the board's direction.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
And then the board can either take action or move it to a second thing or not. But we were talking about the time because of the down weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
We should have all 5 commissioners here
Right.
next week. And then
Okay.
the second request from Commissioner Farr was to identify for county staff to identify the best and highest use of properties along Highway 99.
Yeah, and I probably would amend that slightly just to say, what are the properties? What are the
Just along Highway 99.
Yeah.
And my request is county-owned property, obviously. We don't have much input on what Simmons.
Is it difficult to, and what do you think of this, Commissioner Farr, of expanding it to, publicly owned property, ODOT property, or Eugene property, or, I know LTD has some property along there too.
I'd be fine with that as an adjunct, but I really would like a hastened
Yeah,
analysis of this particular property.
yeah.
What does that mean?
Hasten?
What do you mean by that?
Faster. Hasten
But
means
what
faster.
additional information would you like related just to this property we've been discussing?
Just what are the potential best and highest uses for the tax lots in question that we currently own, as well as the one that's an island that we don't own.
Okay.
And
I'd envision bringing things forward like how is it zoned? Are we aware of
And I guess
environmental things?
to kind of harmonize this, I'd say, I think we're extremely interested and quickly interested in knowing this ownership of these properties on the map that you gave us earlier in this meeting.
Surrounding okay.
Yeah, around here.
Yeah.
But then later, slower, what are some of the public properties along this area besides these properties?
because there's BPA there, there's EWEB there, there's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. And ODOT, I think.
And I think, Mr. Mokrahysky, to include just a slight overview of the building condition.
Sure.
The two existing structures that we own.
Especially 1400 and 1700, and 1601. Okay, any other assignments that should go on the list besides those? I think we're done. Okay, so we're done with 8A and B. We are done with 9. We're now going back to County Council 6A. So, Mr. Dingle, Lane County Council, what announcements do you have?
Chair Sorenson, I don't have any announcements. I was really here to answer your questions about the potential of this curfew and
Okay.
to bring it in line with the rest of the downtown.
Excellent. Okay, number 10, executive session. We are having no executive session. Is there any other business, number 11? Did we cover everything? Okay.
Yep.
And I guess under 11, other business, I would just like to thank the agenda team and especially Mr. Mokrahysky, Evan Ashbridge, and Diane Jones for helping keep the meeting organized in my rare running of a meeting, and without their help, we would not be finishing at 11:39.
You've been chair at least 3 years before this, I know that.
Okay.
You did a great job, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so hearing no objections, we are adjourned.